Hi there, this is going to be the final part of the series which focuses on the move knight d4, the kamikaze attack. I'm not going to mention these moves, we've covered them already, so e3, knight g4, f4, b5, knight f5, e5. And this is the position we reached at the end of the previous part, and here I'm going to look at the move knight takes g7, which is kind of the main line, and also my kind of tip for white, which is bishop d3. I think this is a very dangerous try, and up to now I've really been focusing on black, the best moves for black and finding black defences, but I'm going to give this as kind of my first line in the series where I kind of give it a recommendation for white as well. But first I'm going to cover knight takes g7. So this is the main line, grabbing material, and black has to respond with h5. And to be honest, I've never really done a proper analysis of this opening before making this video. The reason is that black's moves are all very natural, and you don't really need to know much theory, if I'm honest. I've been playing this opening as black for years successfully, and like I say, it's the first time I've done a proper analysis of it. So it's not really necessary to kind of memorise the stuff in this video. It might be interesting just to watch it just through once and just kind of see how black plays his pieces and standard kind of attacking ideas. But apart from that, you can really just make it up as you go along and get really good play against white's queen. So the main move here is c3. The idea is to kind of escape with the queen before black can play knight f2 and win it. Other ideas are basically less good, like bishop d3 has been played by the strong computer Atomcraft. However, it was played out of book, and after e4, white's position is, well, I think that interpolation of those moves has really helped black, and Atomcraft didn't score very well from this position, and in fact lost a game after these moves: h3, knight f2, queen f3, d5. Molten Thinker, playing black, went on to win a nice game here against the computer, and after those bad results, Atomcraft actually changed its book and added c3 to its book instead, which I imagine was probably found by leaving the computer on for a higher depth, and giving it more time to think. So bishop d3 can't really be recommended. e4 is a simple response. F takes e5 is another idea in terms of removing the pressure from f4, so that if knight f2, queen f3 is possible. In fact, there is a nasty trap here, in that if black thinks he's winning material with this knight jump to d2, he actually ends up in a losing position, because bishop d3, knight takes bishop g6, and e4, the second bishop is suddenly coming to h6, and black is in big trouble. He's not going to be able to avoid getting mated by those bishops. So that can't be recommended. Instead, f takes e5 though can be well met by bishop b7 in this case, and this bishop's now attacking g2. Knight f2 is again kind of a threat. Now you've covered f3, and if white blocks it with e4, then again knight f2 comes in. So f takes e5 is well met by bishop b7. So c3, the main move, again trying to evacuate the queen over to b3 before knight f2 comes in. If black does play knight f2 anyway, queen b3 forces d5, and then queen b4, c5, queen a5. This exchange of queens which white forced is really a good result for white. Well, you shouldn't forget that white is a rook and a pawn up, so I don't think that a knight on f2 fully compensates for that with the queens off. With the queens on, it's a bit of a different story, because black has a lot more attacking options and can kind of crack open the position, and also because white's queen is the main problem piece, getting rid of it is a big result for white. So instead, black shouldn't hurry with that and should play d5, just getting ready for the queen to come to b3 so it doesn't gain a tempo when it does. Again, f takes e5 can be played, because now bishop b7 isn't as good as it was before, because black's put the pawn on d5. However, d4 is a good move. Again, black should avoid playing knight f2 to e4 to d2 for that same bishop invasion that we saw a minute ago. But d4 is nice, and now again if e4, knight f2 is very good for black. And if it's hard to see what else white can really do, because if that e-file does open up, then queen e7 is going to be really nasty, and also knight f2 is of course a big threat here, with e3 and c3 under attack. So, queen b3 immediately, again preempting knight f2 so it doesn't gain a tempo, is probably the best move. And now I recommend a5. This position is often reached by computers with white who you kind of get out their book around this stage and then don't really realise how much danger the queen is in. And if white wastes time by playing something like h3, after knight f2, black is now threatening knight d1, and this queen is going to get lost very quickly. Also queen a3, there was a game Opossum played queen a3 against Molten Thinker again. Molten Thinker showing again good play for black in this opening, played c5, and now he's going to continue with a4 and b4. So Opossum played c4, and now an improvement on that game would have been to continue with a4, really clamping down on this queen, and if c takes b5 then knight f2, coming into d1, and white's queen is in big trouble. The best move for white is to take on b5 with the bishop, just trying to get rid of these pawns at kind of any cost really, so his queen has a bit more space to breathe. And this has been played several times by Atomcraft. Only once did it actually meet my recommendation, which is bishop a6, so that's controlling the b5 square, so white's queen can't use it. And in that game Atomcraft played knight a3, although this was at a very fast time control, so I'm not quite sure. I suspect it wasn't at a high depth that it came up with this move. And after knight f2 I do like black's position, threatening to come into d3, and if white plays d3 to stop that, then knight d1. Queen b7, knight takes b2, queen c8, queen takes, and black has a piece for a pawn in this endgame, so it's really the only side that can win. White could try queen b6, but after capturing b3, with having the queen and white's king still kind of in the middle, and these pawns are advanced, so the position is likely to open up, I would say black's really kind of got good chances of winning this game. So I wouldn't recommend knight a3. Again, h3 and queen a3 are just kind of slow. h3 knight f2 obviously helps black, and queen a3 c5. White can play this with d4, the idea being queen a4. Oh, I say that, he shouldn't really play this. He could try playing it like this, but after knight f2, black is actually winning. He just ignores white's threat, and if white carries it out, then you can see now that knight d3 is a really big move, and b3, knight d3, d4, smash, black is winning. So the best move that white has is actually queen b7. If we go back up, so after bishop a6, queen b7. This is the best move, and black can take that. I mean, if black really needs to win, then he could go for that material imbalance and try and invade with the queen. However, I'm not sure that that's objectively a good idea. I think white can probably defend the queen with accurate play, and his extra pieces may end up winning the game. Knight takes h2 I'm going to do my recommendation, because I've analysed this and I believe that after queen c8, queen takes, black has, at the very minimum, is a draw from this position. The best defence I've been able to find for white does secure a draw, but if he's a bit careless, he can actually end up in trouble. So, for example, d3, blocking off this bishop, h4, knight a3, h3, captures, king f7. This is the best defence I've been able to find for white, in that after bishop d2 he does manage to get his king to approximate safety over here, and after rook g8, castles, rook g2, king b1, black can secure a draw with either bishop takes d3 with a repetition of moves, or by playing e4 first and forcing knight b5, and then again capturing and repeating the moves. But then that is the best white defence. If he's a bit less careful, say for example he might play knight a3, h4, knight b5, and now suddenly after h3 takes king f7, black suddenly has more chances of winning, because his rook will invade, and potentially if this bishop can be rerouted, or he can create some more chances with his pawns, white might get in trouble here. So white really is looking at the best at getting a draw in this line if black plays accurately. And again, of course, what black could have taken on b7 and end up with a unclear position. So that's knight takes g7. That's the most common move, and the move that all the computers really like to play and try and defend the initiative. However, I mean, I wouldn't go near that move, and I don't think many other people would either, because black's initiative is just too unpleasant to deal with. So bishop d3, this is the kind of what I'm going to end the knight d2 analysis with, is a very, very dangerous move to face. In fact, for a long time I was struggling to find the defense for black in this position. A lot of the kind of usual moves really get refuted quite quickly. For example, h5 is one move which you might think is a natural option here. But instead of taking on g7, white can play knight e7. And he's threatening bishop g6 checkmate at the same time as knight takes c8, which basically leaves black in a completely lost position. So that can't be recommended. Other moves get met by often knight takes g7. The reason is, say for example d5, knight takes g7. Now h5 can't be played because of bishop g6. And if you can't play h5, then you're in a bit of trouble really as black here, because this knight can't move. So white can simply attack that knight, or maybe play bishop f5, and is in a really good position. In fact, white is winning here. So these kind of natural moves get met by quite simple refutations. The most popular move in practice has been bishop b4. However, after c3, g6, which is the idea that's usually been played, black's idea is that knight g7 check, king f8. This g6 is kind of taken the same kind of role that h5 usually does, in that you control h5 and allow this knight to move, and what black's got good counterplay there. But there's a problem, because c takes b4 is actually very good for white here. And if knight f2 is kind of coming in, this queen suddenly has a lot more space over here now. And so defending this, queen a3, and now black can't really protect against this queen without weakening d6. So c5 is met by knight d6, and if b4 then queen a4 check. Again, this d6 square is really weak for black, and he's in big trouble. Knight takes h2 gets met in the same way. This queen just comes over here and is kind of wreaking havoc in black's position. So that was kind of a big problem. I was struggling to find a good defense, but I think I found one in the move e4. I think this is black's best try. And here white should avoid taking on g7 here, because h5 then gives black a good version of the main line. The knight on g4 is very strong, and the queen has got no real good squares. But there are two other moves that white could try. So one is h3. So now white is threatening to play knight takes g7. So black can't kind of take time out to play a move like bishop b7 or d5, because then knight takes g7 will come, and has to play h5. And now white's idea is that he plays knight e7, not knight takes g7. And here it's important for black to play the move knight f2. This is a very good move. I mean, if black plays bishop b7, which might seem natural, he ends up with a bad position, because h takes g, e takes d, e4. And material's level, but white has this strong knight on e7, which is causing some damage to black. So instead, knight f2 is the best move. And now queen g4 is white's idea, giving away this queen and then capturing on c8. And after e takes d3, black is 2 pawns down, but he does have this strong knight on f2, which I think gives good compensation for the material. And white's king is going to be a bit dodgy for quite a long time. I mean, if white doesn't move this rook, then knight takes h1 is a possibility, and when the exchange for 2 pawns is a reasonable material imbalance. So white's going to have to either move that or castle. Castling is possible because knight takes h3, king f2. This is kind of, I suppose, a trap that white could try and set. Black might think he's winning there. But Black can simply leave that and maybe just kind of play on this side of the board with, say, g5, and is going to have good play against White's king. So I think that gives perfectly good compensation for Black, with knight f2 being a very important move in that position. Instead, White could mix his move order up, and this is what I'd recommend for White, to play knight e7 first, because this forces bishop b7, and then play h3. So just switching that move order up, which now means that if Black somehow takes this pawn, say White takes here, h takes g4, h5, and we get back into this position again, which is the nice position for White, with this knight on e5. So that would be a good outcome for White. Fortunately, Black does have a better defence, which is knight h2. Again, this is the important move, knight h2. And the idea is that you're coming to f1, which is threatening to win the game. So if White does try and kind of get the queen out over here, or thinks, oh, I'm going to win with knight d5, thinking bishop takes queen h5 and then queen d5, he gets smashed a bit by knight f1, which wins for Black. So it is possible to play queen h5 first, and then knight c6. This can be tried. D takes c6 is an important move to avoid the queen d5, or at least stop it from winning the game. And here you get this position where knight f1 is still a threat, so White has to deal with that. So bishop takes e4, or maybe rook takes h2. But Black's position here is quite decent. Maybe you just take this, and you have a rook for 2 pawns, so Black's doing very well there. Instead, I think what White should do is play a exchange sacrifice immediately with rook takes h2. So basically saying that this strong knight on e7 is good compensation for the exchange, which I think is true. I think this position is kind of balanced. So Black has the extra material, White has this initiative, and there are a few different options for Black here. One, probably the best option I think, is f5 or maybe g6. They could probably both transpose to each other, but they do also allow White to get a draw if he wishes. So for example, there is a forced draw here with queen h5, queen h4, bishop g7, so defending against b2, and then bishop f6, bishop g7 with a repetition. So that is one possibility. This position is incredibly fresh, though. I mean, this analysis I've just shown you is basically, this is fresh analysis that I've done and has not been played in any games. So it's possible that, you know, over time there will be some new lines coming up here, and some of the lines I've shown you will have kind of new tweaks and nuances in them. If Black wants to avoid a draw, he can try h5 here. This seems kind of like an interesting option, but it does give White these squares on f5 and g6 for his own knight. So it's kind of really unclear whether that's a good idea or not. Certainly I don't think White should be worse here. You can see you can immediately grab the exchange with knight g6 if he wants to, or play knight f5. So for example, maybe knight f5, and now one idea is bishop c5. And if White does take that pawn on b5, then Black's going to get some good play with bishop a6. So d3, g5, with a very unclear position. So knight check, king f8. That's just, again, an indicative line. There are lots of possibilities here, and I'm not going to go through all the analysis or all the possibilities that can occur. But I think this position is just really interesting, and something that you could play for both sides. So that's really it for the end of the kamikaze attack. So the next video will be about a different opening. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you'll come back for the next video.